Hey, LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, the Chancellor has warned inflation is likely to rise as a result of the war in the Middle East. Oil prices climbed to more than $100 a barrel earlier for the first time since Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022. Fuel prices have already risen by 5 pence per litre, and it could have a knock-on effect to energy bills, food and transport. Founder and CEO of Octopus Energy, Greg Jackson, has told LBC things aren't as bad as when Russia invaded.
This is bad, it's serious, but it's not yet in the same league. Now, you will remember that in the last crisis, prices got so high that the government had to subsidise everybody's electricity bills. So, I know they've got a watching brief, but we're not in that territory yet.
Liz Kendall has told LBC the government is prepared to legislate every year to keep up with technology. The Tech Secretary says she expects companies to pay fines from Ofcom after it merged just a fraction have been. And the royal family have attended an annual service celebrating Commonwealth Day at Westminster Abbey. King Charles and the Queen were joined by the Prince and Princess of Wales and Princess Anne. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed down 35 points at 10,249. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.15. LBC weather. Much of the UK will be cloudy tonight. Some scattered showers for the north and west, a low of 3 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. It's 6 p.m. Now, Tonight with Andrew Marr.
Good evening. And I think there are just a few very basic questions we need to try to answer tonight. Iran's new supreme leader is Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the assassinated former supreme leader. Doesn't this mean that the regime is getting, if anything, even harder line and more anti-Western, exactly the reverse of what Donald Trump expected? And if so, doesn't that suggest that a militarily hugely successful conflict by the US and Israel might give them a big strategic failure? Further, the longer this goes on, the higher go oil and gas prices, the more exposed the Gulf countries become, and the bigger the economic hit on all of the rest of us. In the Commons this afternoon, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, was warning that inflation is likely to rise in the coming months. Both the AA and the RAC are already telling drivers to restrict their use of petrol. More widely, higher oil prices are very good news for Vladimir Putin's Russia. And Putin, surprise, surprise, has declared unwavering support for Iran's new hardline leader. Meanwhile, American military types are beginning to worry about the stockpiles of their very clever missiles. In short, the wider picture isn't an uninterrupted sea of roses. But I have one piece of good news. In discussing all of this in an exclusive interview with Iran's ambassador in London, Saeed Ali Mousavi, he told me that Britain is not at war with Iran. At any rate, not yet. I began by asking him, however, about this new supreme leader and whether he represented continuity with the last supreme leader.
The late supreme leader, he had a very important and huge endeavors to preserving the Iranian territorial integrity, and I do believe there is one continuity into keeping of this kind of principles: Iranian sovereignty, Iranian territorial integrity, Iranian dignity. But there is, according to the Shia jurisprudence, every jurisprudent, every mujtahid has their own deduction, has their own, analysis regarding how to address the different issues, different matters in the society, inside of Iran, and international community, outside of Iran. And so, in answering your question, I do believe there is one in continuity while changing, while adapting ourselves with the new issues.
So does this mean that the American belief that by this war they could fundamentally change the nature of Iran and the Iranian state, they are wrong?
I do believe that, again, they are wrong because they want to make some problems for our territorial integrity, for our national integrity inside of Iran. And so, totally wrong. But regarding for other matters related to the Iranian people will, the Iranian people would like to have a economic and as well as other fields, industrial fields, progress and development. And so after this war, again that we keeping and maintaining all our national integrity of our independent political independency, we are going to find some solution. We're going to find some approaches how to develop, how to manage ourselves according to the new condition and circumstances after the war.
That's interesting. Can I ask you to put yourself into the shoes, as it were, of a young Iranian in Tehran who doesn't like the hijab, doesn't like women to be covered in that way, who wants more freedom of speech, who wants a change in the complete political atmosphere? Am I going to get what I want because of this war?
You see, that every society, one of them in Iran, is a dynamic society. And so live society, the transfers of the generations, my generation is totally with my son and my children's generation. They have their own, concerns, they have their own issues. And if you want to manage the society, you should respect this kind of changes. You should observe.
So you think there will be changes coming?
Yeah, I think that is every time now every time and now we are talking with each other, the changing is continuing, and so it is very important that please first of all to observe it and then recognize it and then to respect and provide a very good conditions and circumstances how to manage the society, how to manage the people, going to development in the different fields.
I want to come to the war in a moment, but just before I do, one of the problems that your country has had around the world are the images of young protesters being hanged in public, protesters being gunned down or shot, the extraordinary violence and the body bags and all the rest of it. Do you accept that that part of your country's recent history has been a stain on Iran and something that needs to change?
First of all, let me correct your wording that's regarding for the hanging of the protesters.
We've seen them.
No, but I think you as a professional journalist, you should verify everything regarding. We are every fake news and misunderstanding and mismanagement, misinformation and disinformation. There are a lot.
Sure, but the killing of protesters.
But you see that I got your point in your question. I do believe that in accordance to the Iranian laws and regulations, there are many chances for to have a peaceful protest inside of Iran, and so. But unfortunately, some with the foreign interference and some abusing of this laws and regulation inside of Iran, the peaceful protest shifted to the riots and very bloody, gatherings. And so that I do believe, if you want to,
but I'm sorry, but the IRGC itself and the Basij militias have been brutal.
No. You see that I hope that one time that you travel to Iran, see that the IRGC and Basij people, they are loving their country, they are defending their own country. And so you see they voluntarily defending the Iranian internal integrity and as well as territorial integrity and Iranian dignity. But you see, unfortunately, there are many negative propaganda against the IRGC and as well as Basij. During the imposed 8 war between Iraq and Iran, there are a lot of Iranians who were volunteer to go to help and assist our combatant against the Iraqi invasion. And so this is the Basij. Basij, it means that gathering all of the people in this war, in the Persian war. And so now they continue their functions to preserve and maintaining the Iranian security and safety. And they are working, the Basij, who are working in different fields. For example, in vaccination. During the COVID crisis, that we use the Basij for vaccination all of the people inside of Iran. There are very good, actual potential to serve the public.
Let me turn to the war itself. There's been a bit of confusion about the status of the Gulf states, UAE, Dubai, Qatar. Are they legitimate targets for Iran or not? Now, there was one statement and then another statement, and the missiles continue to fall. So are those countries, some of which have American bases in them, legitimate targets?
First of all, for answering this question, that's a very significant question. We should come back to the root causes of this crisis. Root causes of this war in our region are the American and as well as Israeli regime's attack and aggression to the Iranian people and Iranian country. And so we have declared to them that if they want to attack us, if they want to make aggression as a criminal act, according to international law, we will defend ourselves. We will defend our territorial integrity and the Iranian national sovereignty. Unfortunately, there are many military bases in the different Persian Gulf countries over there, and we have declared to them if they want to abuse these kind of military bases or properties or any assets against the Iranian people and against the Iranian national sovereignty, we consider them as a legitimate targets and will act accordingly.
So what would be your message to British people sitting at the moment in the Gulf states and wondering, should I go home? Shall I carry on staying here? Are they actually on the front line of a war?
You see, first of all, that I'm very sorry regarding for this crisis made by, this war made by the American and Israeli regimes against all of the peoples living in the region, including the British peoples. And so I am very sorry, and I'm declaring my sorry. Give them some
advice.
Yeah, my advice, that the British government has different facilities regarding for the repatriation of them to come to to the UK. But I do believe that there is no any intention from the Iranian side to harm them. There is no, because we know the exact location of the military bases, the properties of American side in them, in these countries. And if they want to come back their own country, it depends up them. It up to them. And I'm telling you, and I'm assuring you that there is no any hostility from Iranian side, not only for the British people who are living there, but also for all of the civilians people living in the Persian Gulf countries.
In the old days, perhaps even now, people in your country used to describe America as the great Satan and Britain as the little Satan. There's been a big controversy inside the UK political system about whether or not we should be part of the original war against Iran. And we have chosen not to be, but to protect ourselves if we are attacked or our allies are attacked. Do you regard the position of Britain and America as being similar or significantly different?
I do believe it's different. These positions, the British government, British authorities declared that they have no any involvement in this war, and they know that this war is illegal according to the international law. British government and British authority mentioned that they do not repeat the bad experience from the Iraq invasion. That's all of them we welcomed. That's very important factors. But regarding for our strategy, if they want, attack us, if they want to making some threats against the Iranian national territory by using and abusing of the, in the name of the collective self-defense or individual self-defense, there is no doubt that we will defend ourselves. We will defend ourselves as our inherent right to self-defense.
Because your country has attacked Akrotiri, the RAF base in Cyprus.
No, not at all. That the Ministry of
where did that come from? That missile come from?
No, the Ministry of Defense made a declaration that this is one example of the flag, false flag. The Ministry of Defense mentioned that there is no any signs that all of these drones belongs to the Iranians. No, that it's very important that now I do believe you know what I mean. There are many false flags to making and abusing to making some riots and chaos in our region. For example, regarding for Turkey, Azerbaijan, all of them are flags. And regarding for your base, military base in Cyprus as well.
Where do you think the missile came from, if not from you?
No, not at all. No.
It came from somewhere.
No. I'm telling to you that we have a very important and historical diplomatic relations. Although that is now challenging, but I do believe me as the Iranian ambassador, I'm trying to manage the bilateral relations and my colleagues in the foreign policy.
So you think you would say we are not at war, our countries, at the moment?
Yes. We are not. Not only for you, not only for the British people, but also anybody. Iran is a peace-lover country, and so we do not have any war with anybody. And so now we are defending ourselves against the aggressors.
And so what would be your advice to Keir Starmer at the moment, wondering about what to do next?
You see that Prime Minister Keir Starmer is a politician. He has the different advisors and he has a different consultant regarding for the Iranian situation, Iranian circumstances. My advice to not only Prime Minister Keir Starmer, but also for the British political establishment, please increase your knowledge regarding for the Iranian people, Iranian culture, that the Iranian people, do not have any hostility with the British people.
Final question. The price per barrel has now gone up above $100 a barrel. Is it part of Iran's defensive strategy to drive up energy prices and to cause an economic pain in the West, and therefore to people listening to this program who are worried about their bills? Is that part of the war?
You see that now, but again, I ask you to come back to the root causes of this war. The American regime and Israeli regime made this aggression against Iran, and Iran now is defending ourselves. And we are very sorry that the increasing of the oil prices in the world, but all of the international public opinion should ask the root causes, Israel and American sides, to stop the war because they are damaging the prosperity and economic happiness of all of the world.
Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for talking to LBC.
Thank you so much.
Now, coming up later, the star playwright of the moment joins me to talk about LBC's Online Safety Day. Plus, I'll be speaking with a senior former general to ask what he makes of our defence strategy. Time now, 6:19.
This is LBC.
A Southern train is a place where you can have more me time. A chance to recharge yourself and your phone. To stretch out, sit back, and when you hear "all change please," you'll know you already have. Go with your flow and save with advance tickets at southernrailway.com. Terms apply.
Octopus Energy. Great value and outstanding customer service. Recommended by which? A record 9 years running.
My name is Karen and this is my NHS story. You don't realise how blind you are until you have cataract surgery. I was referred to a surgical hub and they booked us in for an operation. It was about 3 weeks before I was there. It's very, very quick.
The government is opening more surgical hubs with more than 120 already operating across England, so the NHS can be there for all of us when we need it. Find your closest one at gov.uk/NHS Fit for the Future.
It's hard to concentrate when you can't shake a health worry. It can feel like there's a wall between you and the rest of the world, like you can't be fully present. Hello, AXA Health. How can I help?
If something's playing on your mind, AXA Health support line nurses and counsellors are ready to listen day or night. For cover that cares, search AXA Health Insurance. 24/7 health support line available to all members. Treatment for pre-existing conditions is not covered.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Watch live on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
6:20. The Defence Secretary, John Healey, is on his feet in the Commons right now, defending Britain's response to the conflict in the Middle East. But let's hear from the former commander of Joint Forces Command, Sir Richard Barrons, who co-led our Strategic Defence Review and who before that himself served in both Afghanistan and Iraq. Sir Richard, great to have you on the show. How deep do you think the embarrassment is at the top of the armed forces about the slow nature of that ship, the Dragon, being sent to the Mediterranean, and the perception, certainly among the Americans, that we have been too little, too late?
So I think it's wrong to talk about embarrassment. What we need to recognise is an argument about whether to send a single ship, even one very highly capable air defence ship, to the Mediterranean or keep it in the North Sea. It reflects what the Defence Review nailed down, which is in the world we now live in, the bar for defence is much higher, and the armed forces that we currently have, which are pretty much how the post-Cold War era left them, a journey of about 35 years of getting smaller and hollowed out, are not the armed forces that we need for the world we now live in, before you even factor in how much the character of war is changing.
And that's really what the SDR says. I mean, I detected increasing anxiety among military people about whether the government is going to spend enough quickly enough. Keir Starmer certainly talked the talk in his Munich speech, but has he walked the walk?
So we're clear about the dilemma. The Defence Review settled a journey over 10 years. And that journey was set against a financial profile for 10 years, which essentially meant not much happens now. You get a bit more money in 2027. And we're all heading for a big increase in defence spending in 2035 of 3.5% of GDP, another 1.5% on infrastructure. So the conundrum behind the review was it says the right things, but the government's will, and I would actually say our collective civil will to fund this as quickly as the risks suggest is simply not there yet.
And that is presumably the job of politicians to make that argument, to persuade people that however great the pain, for instance, welfare spending is going to have to come down in order to increase defence spending.
So I think that's exactly the hard choice we as a country are facing. I think the challenge for our politicians is we ask them to set out that sort of case. But when they look at the polls and need to win elections, they're not seeing a UK civil society that's demanding less welfare now in order to spend more in shorthand on warfare. So I see it's really difficult. So I think this question is more for every citizen of this country, which is, if you want to be safe in the world we now live in, you are going to have to spend more public money on defence sooner. And since we don't want to tax or borrow anymore, that means you're going to have less of something else. It's no harder than that, but it's really hard to choose.
Now, you can tell me that I've got it completely wrong, but I have, as it were, detected a shift from irritation and unease among military commanders, military leaders about how much we're spending on defence to something closer to anger. We had the leak from the National Security Council, very interesting, but very damaging for the Prime Minister. Are we in danger of seeing a rift, not between one person and another, but between, as it were, the political leadership of the country and the military leadership of the country?
So I don't think we're going to see a rift, but I don't think we should diminish how hard this is for both sides of the argument. I mean, the peril for the military commanders and the service people that they command are that they could be asked to go into an operation of war with what they have, knowing that they are at an acute disadvantage to the way their opponents turn up, and they're still going to go. and they'll still have to do the best they can, but they're not being set up for
with the right gear. Now, I did say at the beginning I was going to ask you about this war generally. To what extent do you think it's going to come down to who runs out of missiles first? Because clearly the rate of missile attacks and drone attacks from Iran has slowed dramatically, suggesting that they are running out of the kit. But at the same time, we hear the Americans are getting very worried about their own stockpiles.
So I think the key factor here is how many ballistic missile launchers and drone launchers do the Iranians have, because they might have thousands of missiles buried away in mountains in Iran, but they've probably only got 200 to 300 ballistic missile launchers left, and the might of the US Air Force and supported by the Israeli Air Force is looking for them. So it's a really high-risk occupation to roll out into the open, which you would have to do to set up a ballistic missile to fire it at the region and then not be detected. The instant it's fired, it's detected. And something will be coming to fire at it. So from an Iranian perspective, they may run out of launchers before they run out of missiles. For the US, it's easier because they so dominate the skies over Iran. They're not going to use so many missiles, standoff weapons now. They're going to dip into their, frankly, large stocks of precision bombs, and they aren't anywhere close to running out.
And the American defense industry is able to replace, do you think, the missiles as quickly as America's going to need them? I mean, obviously, everybody's looking with worry about Taiwan, but there's also the Ukraine war going on too.
No, we should be absolutely clear that the rate of consumption of the really exotic things like missiles in attack or defense, they are being consumed in a number of conflicts way faster than even US industry can replace them. And that's why you're seeing this high-low mix, this mix of missiles and drones, which frankly you can make in very large numbers quickly.
General Sir Richard Barrons, thank you very, very much for talking to me. Now, listen to a lot of the British media, and you'd think the big strategic questions are for Keir Starmer. But from what we've already heard today so far, they're really for Donald Trump and the White House. Yet again, we ask, where is the strategy? What is the plan? I'm joined now by LBC's Washington editor, Simon Marks. Simon, first of all, Donald Trump says he's going to decide who replaces Khamenei as the leader of Iran, and that's his job. And second, there's been a lot of talk about people in the streets rising to overthrow the regime. The regime looks pretty secure at the moment, and they have just chosen Khamenei's extremely anti-Western son as their leader. Does this not leave Donald Trump with a bit of a strategic failure?
Well, he's still got a lot of explaining to do, Andrew. There's no doubt about that. And he's going to be doing some of that explaining perhaps in just about 3 hours' time, when the president says that he's going to be giving a press conference from Mar-a-Lago in Florida before then returning to the White House. We are still in a situation where President Trump has not presented the American public with any kind of fact-based, reality-based vision for what happens next in Iran, where the American death toll in the conflict has now risen to 7 members of the US armed forces who have been killed as a result of Iranian reprisals that have been taken against US forces for a conflict that is now entering its second full week. And there is clear evidence coming from the region, particularly from the Saudis and from the Qataris, that their personal level of comfort with this going on for very much longer, given the economic dislocation that it's causing, given the ongoing launches by Iran of ballistic missiles that are targeting their territory, is limited. So the president is coming under pressure from a number of different sources, and let's see if he can offer any kind of vision in 3 hours' time.
Well, let me ask you a bit more about the pressure, because, you know, oil hitting and then going above $100 a barrel, the impact on inflation, the impact on the American economy in due course. We know that the midterms are coming up later in the year. Is there a point at which, as it were, Wall Street picks up the phone and says, President, this has got to stop?
Yes, I think there is. I'm not sure that we're at that point yet. I mean, bear in mind that the increase in the price of oil is going to hit consumers in Britain, in Europe and Asia much harder than it hits people here. However, last week alone, the price of diesel at the pumps here increased by more than 71 cents a gallon. That's a new weekly record increase for diesel. The price of petrol was up more than 40 cents a gallon, and those price rises are still taking place. President Trump said on social media over the weekend that these are short-term oil prices, which he said will drop rapidly when the destruction of the Iran nuclear threat is over. He said it's a very small price to pay for American and world safety and peace, and only fools would think differently. Well, there are many American motorists out there that don't necessarily share that view as espoused by the president. I think one of the questions will be over the next few hours is whether he's going to walk any of that back and say to Americans, I feel your pain as you go to the gas station and fill up.
Simon, as ever, a great crisp analysis. Thank you so much. Now, the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has warned that the UK faces a rise in inflation as a result of those spiking oil prices because of the war in Iran. But what does that mean for you and your pocket? Time now, 6:30, and Amelia Cox has your news headlines.
The Iranian ambassador to the UK has told LBC Iran is not at war with the UK. Speaking on Tonight with Andrew Marr, Saeed Ali Mousavi insists Iran is a peace-loving country and is defending itself against the aggressors. The Tech Secretary has told LBC X failed to turn up to a meeting to discuss violence against women and girls hosted by the government. Liz Kendall says she thinks the company should have sent someone in the wake of issues with its Grok chatbot being used to create intimate images. And Glasgow Central Station will remain closed for a second day following a major fire at a nearby vape shop. A number of businesses were destroyed when the 19th century building next to the station collapsed. LBC weather, much of the UK will be cloudy tonight, some scattered showers for the north and west, a low of 3 degrees.
This is LBC.
You've probably been with the same energy supplier for decades. And why wouldn't you be? Loyalty matters. But lately, bigger hasn't always felt better. You've probably dealt with long waits and endless automated menus in search of someone who can actually help. Octopus Energy is now Britain's biggest energy supplier, trusted by over 8 million customers, because we do things differently. Our people focus on the most important thing, you. When you call, you'll speak to a real person. No robotic scripts, no computer says no, just an honest conversation with someone who actually wants to help. Join the millions who've already made the move. Octopus Energy, recommended by Which, a record 9 years running. Visit octopus.energy/better for verification.
Okay, do emails. Burnt toast. And now I've got to sort my repeat prescription.
Or just tap the NHS app.
The one I've already got?
Yep, you can check test results, view your GP health record, and request repeat prescriptions anytime, anywhere.
All while the kettle's boiling?
Before it boils. And turning on notifications means you'll know the moment you get a new message. We're delivering an NHS fit for the future. Never miss a message. Request repeat prescriptions and more when you tap the NHS app.
If you were missold a home on a holiday park, holidayparkadvicecentre.co.uk could help you receive compensation. Text ADVICE to 78900.
Tonight with Andrew Marr. Listen on your smart speaker. Just say, play LBC.
6:33. Now, we've talked a lot about the economic consequences of the war, but we've barely scratched the surface so far. The AA and the RAC are saying already that people should consider cutting out some non-essential journeys and changing their driving style to conserve fuel. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, is talking about releasing oil stockpiles, and she's warning of increased inflation ahead. Serious stuff, I think. Let's find out what MPs are thinking from LBC's Deputy Political Editor, Aggie Chambry. Aggie, first of all, this was quite a solemn statement from the Chancellor.
Indeed, you could feel the severity as she was giving this update to MPs. And indeed, this could be a disaster for their cost of living priorities. So Rachel Reeves in the Commons saying inflation is likely to rise in the coming months. Talked about the best way of bringing that down, and well, she said that was de-escalation in the Middle East. She also said that the Treasury was ready to support a coordinated release of collective International Energy Agency oil reserves. She'd met with G7 Treasury ministers earlier today, and with them they'd agreed for that de-escalation and also to guarantee the security of shipping in the Straits of Hormuz, and also
the French are sending an aircraft carrier, I think, at the moment to help with that.
Indeed.
Let me talk a bit about the raw politics of this, because in a sense it just shows how hard leadership is. On the one hand, Keir Starmer's highly controversial decision to stand up to Donald Trump and all the abuse he's got, both from Trump and the papers. On the other hand, the public really like this. So he's doing quite well for the first time with voters. And yet, if oil prices absolutely hammer the cost of living, he won't be around much to enjoy that.
And you say the public are pleased with this. Actually, we've got some new polling in the last few minutes. So last week, a Snap poll by YouGov found that 49% of Britons were against the US president's actions.
49.
Today, that's 59% say they're opposed to military action. And I think the government feels very comfortable, actually, in the position they're in, especially speaking to Labour MPs in the Commons earlier who've spent their weekends in their constituency, who basically said this is playing really, really well on the doorstep. And lots of people talking to them. So one Labour MP saying that they'd been told, look, I don't like Keir Starmer very much, but I think he's right on this. And I heard that from numerous people today.
It'll be very interesting to see that, if we get higher inflation, higher prices, and, petrol starts to be a real problem, whether voters blame Keir Starmer for that, or whether they remember that he was against this in the first place and don't. It's very, very hard to tell.
It's very hard to tell, but it's interesting you say that, because I think what the government is also trying to do is get Reform UK and the Tories on the record about their position and trying to work out exactly what that is and get that on the record, because I think they think that if they do that, and if the cost of living massively spikes, if it turns out that they think Donald Trump is wrong in the end, they want to have that on record from opposition parties.
Really interesting, Aggie. Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to come straight on to that argument, those oil and gas prices, and the oil price at around $100 a barrel. Many people are asking, shouldn't we start drilling for oil and gas again in the North Sea? And you're hearing that particularly from the right of politics. Wouldn't that give us more economic resilience? Well, not necessarily. Let's talk now to Will Hares, head of the energy team at Bloomberg Intelligence. It seems, talking of intelligence, a very straightforward solution. Oil and gas prices are going up. We've still got some in the North Sea. Let's drill there and protect ourselves. Would that work?
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. Well, it's an interesting question, but unfortunately, the UK is a very mature late life basin. We cannot produce all of our own oil and gas. We are far, far beyond our heyday for domestic UK energy, which was around the turn of the century. We produced around 4% of global oil demand, and we've seen a precipitous decline since. We only produce less than 1% now. We are no longer a top 10 country. We are no longer a net energy exporter. And unfortunately, the die is cast for the North Sea oil and gas industry. The declines are set to continue.
So even, Will, if we absolutely pushed everything at the North Sea and tried to pump out more as quickly as we could, it would make no difference at all at the moment.
Indeed. If you had a magic wand and waved it and to double our gas production tomorrow, which could fully meet all of our domestic needs, it's very unlikely that your or my bills would change 1 inch. And this is because gas is priced on the international markets. And this is why we are seeing the impact on gas prices from the disruption in the Middle East. We are price takers, we're not price makers. So when the international price moves up, the UK price will follow automatically.
And so, obvious question, what should we be doing to give ourselves a bit more resilience, a bit more protection to these huge changes in oil and gas prices?
Well, there's actually very little we can do. We are gradually reworking the grid to build in more renewables, which over the long term, it will provide some price stability. But in the near term, it looks like more pain. We are going to be more dependent for our energy security from abroad, from Norway in particular, and of course, the US. We're going to have to rely more on LNG imports to meet the gas demand that we have. Our domestic gas demand is not going anywhere. We rely on a lot of it for home heating, for cooking, and it's very hard to substitute this out with renewables.
So wait for the windmills and accept the pain. Will, it's not the most cheerful message, but I'm sure it's an accurate one. Thank you very much indeed for talking to me. Now, across LBC today, it is Online Safety Day, a subject dear to a lot of your hearts, I know, and something we take very seriously. The Commons is now discussing a Lord's amendment to the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill, which would force ministers to enact a social media ban for under-16s. And the man responsible for the original amendment, Lord John Nash, joins me now. Lord Nash, there's no secret about the fact the government are trying to scupper your amendment. Explain how they're trying to do that and what you think about it.
Well, they're trying to put forward their own amendment, which would allow them, following this consultation, which I would say is totally unnecessary, they can do pretty much anything whenever they want to do it. So I'm hoping that Labour MPs, many of whom have spoken to me privately, and I know support my amendment, will actually defy the whip and do what their constituents want. MPs have had over 300,000 letters, and they make themselves very popular if they did that.
Why do you think the government wants to kick this into the long grass? Is it because they're, frankly, frightened of the power of the big tech companies?
I don't think so, actually. I think they've just been very behind the eight ball. You've got to realise this is a really political manoeuvre from their point of view. They came up with this idea of a consultation the day before my vote in the Lords. So you've got to
not a coincidence, you think?
Not a coincidence. They also said to me that if I called the vote, they wouldn't be able to bring forward this highly prescriptive, wide-ranging amendment to do whatever they like, which in fact turned out not to be the case. So that was a bit of a fast ball.
Now, I mean, in terms of the fundamentals of your amendment to ban social media for under-16s, there are some people say it's completely impossible. There are all sorts of VPNs and ways around these blockades. Kids like that. They understand these things much better than you and I do. On the other hand, Australia has tried it with mixed success, but they've had a go. What's your view of the practicalities?
Well, I've also got an amendment which passed in the Lords to raise the age limit for access to VPNs to 18. But there's a bit of a myth about this ability of children to get around age gating, because there's been no effective age gating at 13 at all. Some social media sites just say, tick a box, what your age is. So, of course, they've been getting around it. But if we have highly effective age verification, which is what my amendment calls for, that would work. That all the tech companies tell me that can be done.
So at the moment, you don't have to sort of show passports or detailed stuff.
No.
You just, and that is the big problem. Now, one of the big issues, of course, is online porn and the way that's been spreading among young people. Do you think that not having the 16-year-old cut off is kind of corrupting and destroying relationships for a whole generation of young British people?
Definitely. And a lot of these children are saying, less than 10% of children are saying that they first saw porn without asking for it, as they do with things like beheadings. Just pushed to them. The NEU had an experiment, and the National Education Union are behind my amendment. They had an experiment recently where they pretended they were 13-year-olds, and within minutes they were sent the most ghastly stuff.
And I know, or at least I've read, that once the government said that there were going to be age limits of these kind of terrible sites, the number of people using porn sites just came off a cliff. It came down, which suggests that an awful lot of those people were young in the first place, were underage.
Quite.
What will your message be to ministers who say tonight, but it's very, very controversial, it's still complicated, we're not sure if it worked, we do need more information?
Well, I'd say that you need to get on with it. Every day that passes, more children are being heard. I was quite shocked to hear Liz Kensal say on LBC today that there's still no proof that there's a connection between social media and harm to children. There's just bags of evidence. Every day I get more and more people writing to me with thorough research showing that there is clearly a link.
OK, a final message. I'm a Labour MP. I'm a loyal Labour MP. I want to do my best for Keir Starmer and the party, but I get your argument, John, and I am wavering, scratching my chin, wondering what to do tonight. What's your message?
Every day that passes, more children are being harmed. We don't need more evidence. We don't need a consultation. We need action.
Well, let's go. That's a very strong message. Let's see what the industry itself thinks about that, because listening to it is the former director of planning at Twitter UK, David Wilding. David, I guess my first question is, as somebody who understands the industry very well, do you think that this kind of amendment, this kind of ban is practical?
I think when you listen to Lord Nash and you understand all the conversations happening around here, you stop and think to yourself, how did we get here? I think you're dealing with unintended consequences after unintended consequences. And the kind of algorithmic media landscape that we have now is certainly not one that is generally working from a healthy perspective in terms of the overall healthy ecosystem.
So get on with it would be your message as well.
I'm not an expert on the legislation in the way that Lord Nash is, but I would certainly say that what you're seeing is a call for restraint. There needs to be more restraint in the business model of these social media platforms, and they're not proving that they can provide restraint themselves. So where else can it come from?
Let me ask you much more generally. It's been said that what we are doing as a society is the biggest single experiment on the brains of our people, particularly younger people, that humanity has ever seen. And that politicians haven't really understood the extent of what's happening. What's your perspective?
I think you kind of look back now, 20 years, and you kind of think, I don't think any of us knew quite the impact that social media would have. I think we've ended up with somewhere where we are now, where you would go, I think my point being, we need constraint. We need people to, find constraint, either themselves or the tech companies find them do it for them, or the government. But we're in a situation now where more and more people are looking at what their kids are seeing online and actually asking themselves, is this where we should be? So I kind of, you can incrementally get to small steps, but you almost need to take a step back and say, is this the social media ecosystem that's healthy for any of us?
And what about these extraordinarily powerful AI tools which can manipulate what you see and what you can believe? I mean, this is a personal thing. I now look at what is now X or Instagram, and I don't really believe anything that I see. I think anything can be manipulated, and therefore most things probably have been.
Yeah. I mean, the tech companies would say that AI is a tool, and like any tool, it's up to the individual how they use them. We've seen only yesterday with the pretty vile, I think they're called roastings that you saw on Grok AI of football fans putting some really vile stuff out about the Hillsborough disaster, about the death of Diogo Jota. Really appalling stuff that Grok AI happily produced for them. Again, it comes back to, where's the constraint coming from? Is it coming from users? Is it coming from tech companies? Is it coming from the government? And I think what we're seeing is more and more moves towards asking for interventions from all of us. And that includes us as individuals as well. We don't have to be spending all of our time doom scrolling. There are more positive alternatives to doing that as well. So it isn't a simple solution, but I think a combination of legislation, self-constraint, but also restraint from the tech platforms and indeed their advertisers would get us a long way.
Everything in politics in the end is a struggle about power. These companies that you're discussing are some of the most powerful entities on the planet.
Yes.
So what do you think about the ability of politicians from relatively smaller countries to really affect them?
Well, they have to govern, but they have to exist by the laws of the country in which they operate, or else they can't operate, as I understand it. But they're not just powerful, they're vastly wealthy. Meta made $201 billion in 2025. It's about $550 million a day. They've also got some of the best AI tech that they proudly talk about. But actually, do they have the willpower to actually make a difference? They've got the resources, they've got the technology. They could do a lot more if they really wanted to.
There's quite a lot of nodding going on in this studio. David Wilding, Lord Nash, thank you both very much indeed for coming in and talking to me. A devastating blaze starting in a vape shop tore through a Victorian building at Glasgow Central Station last night, leaving firefighters battling the flames all night. What does it mean for the loss of a cherished piece of the city's past? Good question. The time now is 6:47.
Coming up at 7 on LBC, Ian Dale.
At 9, your calls on online safety. At 8, cross question. But first, as oil prices shoot up, are we about to experience a cost of living crisis on steroids?
Ian Dale at 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Tuesday night on the sofa, watching telly with Mum again.
Male hawkers stay with the mothers for life.
This is the moment Stephen chose to speak to Barclays about Mortgage Boost, so he could borrow more with help from family or friends. We're helping first-time buyers get on the property ladder sooner. Search Barclays Mortgages. Barclays, backing your future.
Your home may be repossessed if you do not keep up repayments on your mortgage. Subject to application, financial circumstances and borrowing history. T's and C's apply.
Calling all young creatives.
It's time to get prepped for the future you want. And where better than Global Academy? Here's Imad, a GCSE student in Year 11.
Alongside my core GCSEs, such as Maths, English and Science, I studied creative subjects such as media, drama, art and design, business and music technology, which are all recognised by the industry.
Global Academy. Apply now and join us in Years 10 or 12. globalacademy.com.
At TfL, we're opening up more of London for everyone with step-free access. We're continuing to improve accessibility at many of our stations, and now over 200 stations and counting have step-free access, including the entire Elizabeth Line, DLR and all tram stops. That is how we're making the greener way to travel more accessible to all. Search TfL Improvement Plan. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters. Greener than total estimated petrol and diesel car emissions.
Leading Britain's conversation, LBC, tonight with Andrew Marr.
6:49, very nearly 6:50. Continuing with Online Safety Day, a lot of this is, of course, about porn and women and girls' safety and what the online world is doing to our notions of sexuality. I spoke a little bit earlier to Susie Miller, the playwright, screenwriter and lawyer, who you may remember from the show earlier this year. Her play Inter alia, nominated for an Olivier Award, which deals with a mother dealing with the crimes of her son.
Absolutely, and I think that's what the play's about, actually, and it really digs deeply into that. I think women raise their sons with the best of intentions, and they get to about 15 when they're actually part of a peer group that the mother no longer has access to. And as a consequence, the influence that are coming to that son or that boy are very different. And so my invitation is, first of all, let's look at that online space, and second of all, let's invite fathers, godfathers, big brothers, sports teachers to actually have proper templating and conversations with young men about what they're experiencing online.
Because you think there's just a sheer lack of appropriate adult male role models.
I do. I feel like men don't really know what to do in this space. They've been in this space themselves when they were younger. It's slightly different now, and they don't really understand the manosphere or the whole kind of online experience. But I feel like men are the only ones that can really template for their sons and for other young men how to respect women, how to treat sexuality as something that's personal and for themselves, rather than thinking that porn is education. It's basically, porn is supposed to be for entertainment, not education. Unfortunately, it's being used for young men to educate themselves, and it's actually educating them in a way that actually is not always respectful of women.
So is this, you'd like to see male influencers online who have grown up liking women, grown up around women and grown up respecting women, talking about that?
But not just would I like that. I think it's in the interest of our young men. I mean, how on earth can we celebrate young men if this is the influence they have and they think that's the template? They deserve better. Young men deserve better, and young women, as a consequence, deserve better.
Susie, as you know, there's a great debate going on in the country about whether everybody under 16 should be banned from social media. I'm interested, you said earlier on you thought the crucial age was around 15. Is that when you think boys in particular are first coming across not just the influencers, but also porn?
I think they come across it much, much earlier, sadly and frighteningly. And I think that at 15, they suddenly are no longer listening to their mothers. They're thinking, well, what my mother is saying is at odds with what my peer group are saying, and they'll tend towards their peer group rather than the instructions that their mother are trying to train them in about respecting women, avoiding certain conversations. So I think that the locker room banter, the sort of manosphere that becomes a sort of bragging situation, and the way that young boys sort of joke around and banter about young girls and women generally comes to its full force in those sort of early teen years.
You yourself are Australian, and Australia obviously has brought in a ban for under 16s on social media. A very, very hard thing to do, and even harder thing to police. But do you think an essential thing to try?
You know, I feel like you have to try it to see if it's actually going to have a, because at the moment it's just a free-for-all. And I'm not saying that all boys or even all young people abuse social media, they don't. But until we have proper education about how to use social media as a tool, as opposed to a bullying tool or a way of actually bonding over sort of negative ideas, then we really should look at how we use social media. I don't necessarily think we ban our children from screens. I think we teach them how to utilize screens. and how to utilise the web for their benefit rather than, and showing them how they're actually damaging themselves and the people around them by accessing and feeding into an online, basically a negativity that's really encompassing.
Do you see anyone online, any male influencers or other figures who you think, yeah, that's who I would like my kid to listen to more?
Absolutely. Like on Instagram, I came across quite a few yesterday on International Women's Day who were saying, you know, like it's actually up to us. Like this is a male problem and we need to be part of the solution. And that was so rewarding to me to see men come out, and not just older men, but younger men come out and say, you know, it's not all men, but the rest of us have to actually do something to make sure we're part of the solution rather than part of the damage by being quiet. And I think that's part of the problem with fathers. They don't know how to talk about it. So instead of talking about it, they talk about other things like their wins and their prowess as young men, rather than talking about vulnerable moments and rejection and how to handle things that are more challenging.
Well, if you're listening to this, hunt these guys out. Susie Miller, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
It's been compared to the Blitz, and video makes part of central Glasgow look like downtown Tehran after a beautiful 19th century building right by Glasgow Central Station was completely destroyed by a fire, which apparently started in the vape shop but brought down the entire building. Glasgow, one of Britain's great Victorian cities, has lost already some of her finest architecture, and as someone born in Glasgow myself, it makes me feel sick. Let's hear now from Melanie Hay, who's founding director of the Glasgow architectural practice Hamilton Hay Van Jonker, and she's trustee of Glasgow City Heritage Trust. Thanks very much indeed for joining me, Melanie. This was one of those great Victorian buildings in the streets around the station. Just tell people who don't know Glasgow a little bit about what that part of the city is like.
Yeah, I mean, when people come to Glasgow, you often hear them say, look up, because there's so much architectural detail and the kind of stories above just your ground level shops. The area around Central Station is particularly important. Quite often it's the first thing that visitors encounter when they're coming to the city. It's at the heart of the city centre conservation area, and there's many fine examples of the city's architecture around that area. It was developed in the Victorian era, so it kind of represents that Glasgow was a powerhouse of industry at that time, and you know, it had a lot of ambition, confidence and wealth, so that's kind of reflected in the architecture of that area. The building itself was a fine example of the architecture of that period, and it's on a really important corner of Union Street and Gordon Street.
Looking more generally at Glasgow architecture, it is a city with some fantastic buildings in it, but it's been very unlucky recently. There was the terrible fire at the Charles Rennie Mackintosh Glasgow Art School, which really was one of the biggest disasters to hit modern Glasgow after the great motorways were punched through parts of it. But what about the other great buildings that you've lost or are on the edge of losing? I think the People's Palace is now going through a bit of a revival, but that was under threat for a while.
Yeah, it's great to see things moving with the People's Palace, to see that the council are really taking steps forward to refurbish that and save that building. There's also been a lot of positive progress in the area around where the fire was. So the Egyptian Halls, which is an Alexander Greek Thompson building, there's been a kind of long-standing campaign to save that building, and the City Council just stepped in to compulsory purchase that building. So there's talk of that being renovated, and it's a real shame that this has happened so close to that as well. But there is precedent, unfortunately, for kind of fires in the area. The Cadoro building opposite the building that went on fire, that was devastated by a fire in 1987, but they rebuilt that. So yes, I mean, unfortunately, Glasgow does have a lot of kind of bad news stories with fires at the moment. Which is unfortunate.
For those people who don't know Glasgow, encourage them to come and see Glasgow, come and see some of the buildings. Talk a little bit about the West End, some of the great terraces and buildings there. And also the Merchant City has become an absolute centre of Glasgow life. And then you've got the Cenotaph and the Cathedral. Just give them a quick tour.
Yeah, I mean, we've got amazing buildings in Glasgow. We've got the kind of city chambers in the centre with the Merchant City. You've got things like the Panopticon Music Hall, which is the oldest music hall in Scotland, which if you've never been to that, it's incredible. And then in the West End, you've got things like Kelvin Grove Park and the university and things. So Glasgow has a lot to offer. It's a shame it seems to be plagued by these kind of incidents and
In short, come and see Glasgow as soon as you can. Thank you very, very much for joining me and helping explain that. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free Global Player app or the LBC app, where you can also stay up to date with all the latest news, videos and opinion. Download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish, but right now, it's time for Ian Dale.
Thanks, Andrew.
The movement...
On, attention is turning towards the economic effects. Only 10 days ago, the oil price was $75 a barrel. Today, it's soared to $119, but as we speak, it's come down to around $93. Diesel at my local garage in Kent has already